Hello everyone, how are you today? Today we are going to continue our materials in language testing and assessment, that is to create listening assessment or assessing listening. This material is based on Douglas Brown language assessment principle and classroom practices in chapter 6, page number 116, assessing listening. In order to assess listening, as a teacher, we will not differentiate between listening and another language skills like speaking, reading, and also writing. So when we assess listening, we cannot uh, divide or we cannot separate listening only with listening skills, because it is difficult for us as a teacher to assess student listening comprehension if we are not integrated it or we are not connected listening with another language skill. Listening will always be integrated with another skill, like for example, reading, writing, or speaking. For example, you listen to an audio, and then you read the direction, you read the option, or you read the question, then you write the answers. So you integrated listening with reading and also writing. Or another way to assess listening is that you listen to an audio or a video, then you read the question or the direction, then you speak the answer. So listening will always be integrated with another skill. Please remember that. We'll begin. So model of listening according to Nation and Newton 2019. There are many types of listening. The first one, you have one-way listening. So it is typically associated with the transfer of information. So for example, you only listen to someone speaking, then it is one-way listening without you responding to that person. Two-way listening is that typically associated with maintaining social relation. For example, you are doing conversation. You listen to your friends and then your friend listen to you. So there are two ways of listening here. And there are two ways of listening process. The first one is bottom-up process. So it is like, for example, discriminating similar sounds or speech phonema, such as reduced from and also syllable. Another way is that to top-down process. It means meaning-focused listening, such as picture ordering. So here are some model of listening according to Nation and Newton. We will begin with the type of listening, but before that we need to know the factors that affecting listening. So some factors that can affect listening are rate of speech. Rate of speech mean whether the speech is a higher intonation or not, or whether he or someone speaks really fluently, someone really speaks very fast or not. And then second one that affect listening is that background knowledge about the topic and also accent. For example, you are talking to someone from a rural areas that have different background with you, so it will be different, or it will be difficult for you if you are not really understand about the topic that they are speaking about. And then stress and intonation, of course it will if affect the listening skill. For example, the statement and also the question or the direction will have the stress and intonation which is different. And then next one, you have types of interaction and relation among speakers. If you have close relationship with the speakers, you can use listening mode, or you can use informal languages. But if you are interacted with another person in formal situation, for example, you come to the lecturer office, then the listening comprehension will be also different. And there are some level of difficulty, length, text or word or pauses. So in listening, usually the text will cause difficulty for the student. The length of the text and the difficulty, the choice of words, and also the pauses of the audio, or and then speed, whether the speaker speak fast or slowly, And then complicity. Complicity means the sentence or the syntax or discourses, whether they use idiom or not. And then vocabularies that they are choosing in the listening. And also scoring and grammar. This is scoring listening comprehension is also a bit difficult, like writing and also speaking. But we can put some criteria to score listening. Next one, basic type of listening, assessing listening. You have four. You have intensive, responsive, selective, and also extensive. In intensive listening, it is like the student will be able to differentiate between different phonemes and words or intonation. We will look at this in detail more. And then responsive. The second one is responsive listening. It is usually given to the next level of the student, like for example in elementary school student or maybe junior high school student if it is in Indonesia. Like for example, the student are giving greetings, comment or question. And the next one, selective listening. It can be given to the senior high school student, like for example listening to TV news or stories, and then after that you ask them to retell about the stories or to write the summaries or to paraphrase the news, for example. Next one is extensive listening. Extensive listening is listening for the gist, for example, or listening to the main idea, or listening making a reference. So this listening section usually given to the advanced students, like for example university students. But basically you can use intensive, responsive, selective, or extensive listening to assess your student based on their needs, based on the student's level. We'll begin with the first one, intensive listening. So intensive listening, usually it is listening for perception of the component of larger stretch of language, like for example whether the student can differentiate between phonemes, words or intonation or discourse markers. In intensive listening, we have recognizing phonological and morphological elements, for example phonemic pairs. For example, whether the student can differentiate between the word living and also living, or I missed you with I miss you, or can with can't. Another way to assess intensive listening is that to use paraphrase recognition, like sentence paraphrase or dialogue paraphrase. For example, here it is the example of recognizing phonological and morphological elements. The first one is the phonemic pair, consonant. Yeah. For example, the test taker or the student here, he is from California. He is from California. And then the test taker or the student read he is from California, or B, she is from California. So here the difference is that with the pronouns he or she. So sometime if the student do not really pay attention, the words he can be she, for example. And then this is another example of phonemic pair vowels. For example, the test taker here, is he living? The test taker will read is he living or is he living or is he living. Another example is that the morphological with ed ending. For example, I missed you very much, and the test taker will read I missed you very much and be I miss you very much. Whether they can choose this one, whether they can differentiate the word missed and also miss when they listen to it. Another way is that to stress pattern in can't. For example, I can't go tomorrow. I can't go tomorrow. The test taker will read I can go tomorrow or I can't go tomorrow. So here, in intensive listening, the student will only need to recognize the different phonological and morphological elements. Okay, another example of intensive listening is that paraphrase recognition. You have sentence paraphrase and also dialogue paraphrase. In sentence paraphrase, for example, the student will hear, "Hello, my name's Keiko. I'm from Japan." And the test taker will read, "Keiko is comfortable in Japan," or "Keiko wants to come to Japan," or "Keiko is Japanese," or "Keiko likes Japan." If the student really pay attention to the audio, because they are not going to read this, then the best answer will be "Keiko is Japanese." So they need to paraphrase this sentence. "Hello, my name is Keiko. I am from Japan." Second, you have dialogue paraphrase. For example, there are a man and also a woman, and the man said, "Hi, Maria, my name's George." And then the woman said, "Oh, hi, are you American?" And the man said, "No, I'm Canadian." And then the student will read, "George lived in the United States. George is American. George come from Canada, and Maria is Canadian." All these answers actually have possibilities, but they are mostly distractor. For example, the first one, "George lived in the United States." Well, because the woman said mentioned American, it can be if you are not really paying attention. So this is distractor. Second one, "George is American." There is a question, "Are you American?" And the man said, "No, I'm Canadian." So basically, this is not the answer. And then, "George come from Canada." Well, that's the answer. And Maria is Canadian. This is also another distractor. So here in paraphrase recognition, it can be only sentence, only one speaker, or it can be dialogue paraphrase. So it is simple listening comprehension. So this kind of listening comprehension, listening task can be given to junior high school student maybe, or to senior high school student. Next one is responsive listening. In responsive listening, the student will listen to a relatively short stretch of language, like for example a greeting or a question or comment or comprehension check, in order to make an equally short response. So in responsive listening, the students are not only listen to the audio, but they also need to respond to the audio. For example, you can use multiple choice question and also open-ended response to a question. So here in multiple choice question, for example, the student will hear, "How much time did you take to do your homework?" And they will read the option, "In about an hour, about an hour." This is also based on their ability, like about $10, or "Yes, I did," for example. But in open-ended response, the response will be vary. The student can answer based on their ability. Like for example, here it is the combination between listening and also writing or also speaking. In here, the combination is between listening and also reading. For example, same question, "How much time did you take to do your homework?" And then if you need them to write, then maybe they will write about an hour. But if you want them to speak, they will say about an hour or others. Okay. Next, we have selective listening. So in selective listening, um, the student will listen to a short monologue for several minutes in order to scan for certain information. And the purpose is not necessarily to look for global or general meanings, but to be able to comprehend the information in a context of longer stretches of spoken languages, such as classroom direction from a teacher, TV or radio or news item or stories. Some listening selective talks that you can use is that listening close. For example, fill in the blank. I believe you are familiar with this. This is the example. Listen to the telephone conversation and try and fill in the blank. So the student will listen to the full audio, and then the student has to have to complete the missing blank here. Okay. Another way to assess listening selective listening is that to use listening close. Listening close mean close dictation or partial dictation. Another way is that to look at information transfer. You have multiple picture cue selection, single picture cued verbal multiple choice and chart filling, you can see the example in the page number 125 with the picture. For example, the information transfer with multiple choice cued selection, you can see in the picture with the birds and also the squirrel in your book, the example. Chart filling, you can see it in page number 129. For example, the student listen to someone's schedule, daily schedule, and then they have to fill up the chart about the schedule. And then another way to assess them is that to use sentence repetition. Sentence repetition means they will listen to a sentence being dictated by the teacher, and then they have to write it down in the book. This is another way to information transfer. Chart filling, for example, situation 1, situation 2. The student will have to fill up the chart here with the listening, with the audio that they have to listen. Okay. And then the fourth one is that extensive listening. The extensive listening is the listening to develop a top-down or global understanding of spoken language, ranging from listening to lengthy lectures to listening a conversation and deriving a comprehensive message or purpose. So this extensive listening usually can be given to assess advanced students like university student, or you can also use it for senior high school student in the last year. Okay, so here you can ask them to listening for the gist, listening for the main idea, or making inference. For example, the student has to listen to a TED Talk video or a YouTube video and then write a summary. So it is the example of extensive listening. So in extensive listening, you can use dictation, of course, communicative stimulus response tasks, and also authentic listening tasks. In dictation, so in dictation is a basically very usual or general listening tasks that can be used either in beginner students or in advanced students. Here in extensive listening, you can try dictation. The test taker hear a passage typically between 50 to 100 words, and usually it is recited 3 times. The first one, it is recited in normal speed, and then the second one, read with long pauses between phrases or natural word groups. And the third one, it will be read in normal speed one more, so the student can check their work and proofread. So in dictation can be also given in maybe a paragraph or two. Yeah. And second, you have communicative stimulus response tasks. So in communicative stimulus response tasks, usually the student will present it with a stimulus monologue or conversation, and then is asked to respond to a set of comprehension questions. And it is typically or commonly used in standardized testing such as proficiency tests like TOEFL or IELTS, GRE, or other. So for example, the dialogue and multiple choice comprehension item, and then the dialogue and authentic question details. I believe you are familiar with this type of listening tasks because we used to use it in university student. Like for example, in the first time when you are entering the university or the institution, and then in listening class, I believe you have done it many times. The third one, you have authentic listening tasks. Authentic mean the listening. Oh, sorry. The tasks will be authentic and represent the real world activities. So, for example, note taking. Note taking, editing, interpretive tasks, and retelling. In note taking, for example, you give the student audio or a lecture about certain materials, and then you ask them to note taking to take a note about the lectures about the audio. And then second, you have editing a response version of an oral stimulus. For example, you also give them the audio and then you ask them to edit the written version of the audio script. The third one, you have interpretive talks. For example, you give them song lyric and then uh, you ask them to interpret the lyric. Or for example, poetry. You read the poetry and you ask them to interpret the poetry. You ask them to listen to radio or television or a news report, and then you ask them to interpret the news, for example. And then the last one is that to retell about the audio. For example, you give them a movie, you ask them to listen to a movie, and then you ask them to retell about the movie. So basically, in listening, you have first one before you have intensive, selective, responsive, and also extensive listening. If you need more information about listening assessing, you can check the book from Brown Book, language assessment principle and classroom practices, and also you can check the video about assessing listening from British Council. Thank you very much for your attention. If you have any question, feel free to drop your question in the comment below. See you. Bye bye.